In this video, we're working on the Comet, and we are going to go ahead and install a set of Delrin rear leaf spring and shackle bushings, really trick stuff, and remove this old worn out 60-year-old bushing. I'm going to show you what I bought in a second, but first let's tell you why you might need to do this, and I'll show you fully installed on one side, and then we'll do a step-by-step on how to do it on the other side. You can do this at home. It's not the easiest, but it's not the hardest job, and I will show you exactly why you might want to consider it on your old Comet, Falcon, or Mustang. So recently I just installed a ton of parts on the front suspension of my 64 Comet to make this thing handle a lot better, and it really does. The problem that I've run into is now, because I've got so much more front end grip when I go into a turn really hard, I can feel the rear end want to move side to side so much, in fact, that the rear tire has been kissing the inner fender, or the lip of the fender, I should say, and that is not a good thing. You enter a turn or a corner really hard and you load the suspension, the rear end deflects and you actually get rubbing. I've cleaned it up as best I can, but you get rubbing around the tire. That could pop a tire, it's dangerous. You don't want that. You never want your tire rubbing on metal. This is the kit fully installed, and I'll show you it on the workbench. What's nice about it is it uses Delrin bushings and sleeves on the inside and aluminum, and you get a much beefier shackle. It comes with all new shackles, grease fittings so you can grease everything. You install in the back, and then on the front it's the same thing. Not a lot of great light. I'll show you on the workbench, you'll be able to see it better, but what it's replacing is those worn out shackles and bushings. Some of the tools you're going to need, it really helps if you have access to a press. I've got this Harbor Freight press over here. I don't use it very often, but when I do, boy, does it come in handy. So you are going to have to press out your old bushings, and that's not too terribly hard to do. The ones for the shackles, honestly, I didn't even use a press. These just pried right out, no big deal. The front larger bushing, on the other hand, this one, it's pretty mangled, and a lot of this honestly wasn't even from pressing it. It was just beat up, and it just deflected a lot. It wasn't doing its job anymore. It was 60 years old. So you will have to press this out. When you go and install it, which I will show you in tons of detail here in a second, you got to pick up some 1/2-inch all thread. You can use the same washers, get 2 1/2-inch bolts. You'll use something like this to press one of the 2 sleeves or bushings into the sleeve in the frame. So we'll get to that in a second. We'll walk you through everything you need, basic hand tools other than that. Most of your bolts are going to be, I think, 3/4 inch. So you need like 3/4 inch sockets and stuff like that. Basically, if you have like 9/16 through 3/4 inch, you're going to be great for this job. So we will show you what you need to do. Flip the camera around and start the disassembly on the driver's side. Grab your impact 3/4 inch deep well socket and go ahead and zip off those U-bolts. 11/16 and something to hold the spring if you need to undo that one. That plate will drop right out, set it there on the floor. Get yourself a 9/16, in this case a ratcheting wrench, and just go to town. You got to do the upper and the lower. Now that you've got those off, get the longest pry bar that you have. Just kidding, it doesn't have to be that long. And go ahead and pry these loose up here, like so. All right. Now, I know you're going to be eager to go ahead and pry this side off, but what I'm going to tell you is, even though the spring is disconnected, it's actually still under tension right now. So smart thing to do is go grab your floor jack, throw it up under here, and just press up on that spring ever so slightly, not a lot, so you can pry this out, and then you can let the floor jack down and let this flop. Otherwise, you're gonna fight this and it's gonna wanna fly down on you, so be careful. I wonder if this jack is gonna be long enough. Probably not, definitely not. Oh crap, let's grab the wood. Okay. Got our jack, little piece of wood, just a tiny bit of tension, and we'll go pry the other part off. You wouldn't think so, but this really helps. The driver's side is gonna be harder than the passenger side because you have the gas tank here, which means this little part of the trunk is not cut away as much. You can do it though, just like I did, take your time. You kind of have to pry top and bottom. It's under tension. So we're gonna release this, the spring will come down, and then we can transition to the front. See what I mean? So, whoa, and we're back. This should be torqued to 65 foot-pounds, and as you can see, I'm able to loosen it with one hand. So that was too loose. Hey, check out my gold differential. 3/4 inch, and I will check the other side to make sure it's not spinning. Undo this, you're gonna wanna knock this out, and then the whole leaf spring will drop away. And then you can see what you've got to press out. The hardest part of this whole job is pressing out this guy, because there's a bushing and a sleeve, and you got to press both of them out, and it's kind of a pain, but I've got a tool and I'll show you how to do it. This wasn't meant to be a comedy, but here we are. It's stuck. I had to use an air hammer. There should be a sleeve inside there. Either one of two things happened. That sleeve somehow, I don't know. That bolt is totally stuck. You could hammer it, it wouldn't come out. I had to use an air chisel. I tried just backing it out. I couldn't even turn it with a wrench. That's why that side didn't need a captured wrench to hold it. So I went to use my air hammer to knock it loose. I started driving it and it got stuck right here. So now I'm in a real pickle. Don't do this. Okay, now that we've solved that problem, this next part is honestly the most difficult part. So what you gotta do, this side's easy. These bushings here that go to the shackles, I probably can't do it on camera with the phone in my hand, but these just pull out, and they pull out at each side, and when you get them out, they're gonna look like this, right? So just get in there, use some pliers, use your hands, rip these out. That's easy. See if I can do this one hand. That comes out, no problem. If you look in there, you can see some rust build up. You don't want that, so you want to get in there with sandpaper and get all of that out. Over here is the tough part. Now, on the other one that I did, I wound up actually pressing this out in 2 steps. I pressed out the bushing, and then I pressed out that little ring. The bushing, I wound up using a socket for, just found a socket that was close enough in size, pressed it out, it came out okay. This inner ring, this is the part that's a little bit harder to get out. You can see I tried to use a punch at first and knock this thing through, and it just didn't work. It just started messing this up, I stopped. But if you get a fender washer that's for a 1/2 inch, if you look, it's almost perfect. I'll show you a little trick with that. We're gonna go over to my press. I really do think you need a press for that side. Okay, here's the fun part. I do recommend having a table in the back end unless you have a helper. We're gonna try and press out this bushing first. See if we can get it to go. It's not really playing nicely. Oh, something. All right, this is getting scary. I think it's moving. Maybe. Who knows? Yeah, it's moving. Okay, we're gonna keep on pressing. So it's doing what it did last time, where you pump it and it pops every once in a while. It's kind of scary, but I think the sleeve is coming out all in one shot. Yeah, I think we're getting close. Come on. Bingo. This one came out all in one. You can see though how it's rusted real bad in certain spots. We're gonna have to use probably extra sandpaper on this one. The inside looks a little bit more beat up, and we really wanna get all that off so that your new part presses in super easily. The next part is fun. Just go ahead, chalk everything up on a table or a workbench somewhere. Get yourself some sandpaper. I started with like an 80 grit and then went like 120, 220, 320. You probably don't have to go that crazy, but get it as smooth and rust-free as possible, because it'll make it way easier when you have to press all the new parts back in. Definitely read the instructions for this part. You do want to make sure when you press these in that you press them in on the outboard side, meaning the grease fittings are outside, depending on which side you are on the car. It's also important, depending on which side, whether you line it up at the 5 o'clock position or the 7 o'clock position. This is the driver's side, so we're gonna do the 5 o'clock position. I put this in the freezer the night before to shrink it down a little bit. I've got a line marked on here and I've got a line on there, and it's gonna go in just like that. Now on the other side, this went in pretty easy. I just did this with a clamp. The front I had to press in. I'm gonna try that same trick. We'll see if it works. So this one, well, it was going in, it stopped. We'll have to put it in the press. Okay, got it all pressed in. Hey! Obviously, you have to press in the front bushing as well. Just follow the instructions so you orient the bushing correctly. And then I like to use a piece of aluminum so I don't mar the new bushing when I'm pressing it down. Take your time, it should go in pretty easily. So the next thing you're going to want to do after you get your leaf springs all set up, take some sandpaper, like so, whatever you got, get in here and get all this stuff out. Now, in my case, this is actually in really good condition. It's like, was like painted in here, it almost looks like, but nonetheless, we're gonna take some sandpaper. I'm not gonna go too crazy and just get this all nice and clean. And we will put a bunch of grease in here. I'll tell you why in a second. There's one deviation if you're doing this on a Comet. And if you're looking at it like this, I'll explain why later. But there's something different you got to do on a Comet versus a Mustang. This kit is truly made for a Mustang and not a Comet or a Falcon. But first things first, let's clean this all out. Just do that forever. Okay, here's where things get a little funky. So normally you've got this hole right here, and on like a Mustang, you would pull this in with a tool that I'll show you in a second. And see this part right here, the sleeve, that we'll call this the bushing, and then the sleeve that this slides into? Well, on this side, it's sticking out, oh geez, 1/8 of an inch or less. Maybe on this one, it's 1/8 plus. Either way, there's no way for you to add a grease fitting here. If this was a Mustang, this would stick out really far because the frame on a Mustang is thinner. So Comets and Falcons, or at least Comets, have a much wider frame, which is, I guess, good for rigidity and strength, but what it's bad for is you can't put your grease fitting in, because what the instructions tell you to do is drill and tap a hole, 1/4 for a grease fitting, pull this in, and then your grease fitting will line up with this, and you can come back and grease this. Well, you can't do that. So instead, you fill this all up with grease to start, you fill that up with grease, and you hope for the best, and then at some point in time, if you drive this a lot on dirt roads and stuff like that, you know, harsh service life, you may need to pull this apart and re-grease the top one. But you can install the grease fittings, the forward and the rear shackles. So it's only basically 2 of the 3 you can do it. This one you cannot. So the tool that you need, now they sell one, but you know, why buy something if you can easily make it yourself? If you've got a piece of all thread, this is 1/2 inch all thread by like 8 inches long, give or take. Take that, get yourself some fender washers and 2 nuts. That's all you need. And then we'll put this in place and I'll show you how to easily draw that in. I'll have to set the camera down for a second, but I'll show you how it works. It's pretty self-explanatory. And now you just sit here forever and go. You can use one hand, put your wrench up there. You're not taking hardly any force at all, and it's going slowly, but it'll eventually get there. Okay, right there I went from easy to, ooh, hard, which means it's hitting that washer, but as you can see, it's sticking out on that side. So you don't have to do this, but okay, you can see right there. See how it's sticking out a little bit and we know it's flush? We want to basically half that gap. Now you guys might not be as anal as me, and in which case you don't care about this, but it's as easy as just putting a spacer on here, setting it back in there, and just taking a couple small turns until this thing isn't touching, but is half that distance kind of by eye, and then we'll call that good. Okay, for the next part, don't listen to me, listen to the instructions. They lay this out really good, but your kit's gonna come with all different types of spacers. Try and keep them, I will recommend, try and keep them, you know, with one another. So, I've already lost one. Oh geez, where'd it go? I've lost one. I found it. Okay. Basically, pretty self-explanatory, but keep the stuff that goes with the front, with the rear, and then use this in order to get all of your shims correctly set up. I will say grease is your friend here. Grease the crap out of this thing for a few reasons. One, the grease will help hold the thrust washers in place, and it makes it so when you go to actually squirt some grease into this thing, you're not sitting there pumping forever. So we'll go underneath the car, put this in place, throw the nut in, through the bolt, I should say. And from there, we're not gonna tighten anything. I did damage the stock bolt. If you want one that's exactly like this, it's a 1/2-20 thread, it's about 6.5 inches long. So we'll go ahead and put that in, not torque anything. And then this back part's a little bit trickier to line up. You actually have to use a floor jack to basically compress your spring a little bit to get it to line up. You can't just swing it into place, but we'll get this in first. This next part's mildly sketchy. You've got to jack up on the leaf spring in order to get these two to line up. And what I mean by that is if you just try and take the leaf string and put it up in there, the length here will never work. So what happens is you wind up resting the leaf spring on the frame and compressing it with the floor jack until you get it to a point where these two things will slide into one another. And if you're not careful, it'll slip off the jack, and then, you know, that leaf spring will slam down on you. So take your time here, be careful, and really get them to line up. And then once you get it slid in, like not as much as it is now, and it needs to be more slid in than it is. Once you get it slid in, you can take the pressure off the jack, but you know, take your time. Make sure you got both inserts obviously in the right correct washers, you know, the Delrin's in the right spot. And I'm gonna set the camera down and get this all the way in. The front is in, it's just barely loose, just to hold the front in place. Couple things real quick. Ran into a little bit of a snag. I did get the car back on the ground. I drove it, and I will say it has solved my problem, meaning I can corner as hard as I'd like, and I never have an issue with the tires dropping. However, and this has nothing to do with this kit, but whoever installed the lowering kit before me, or at some point, maybe not them, drilled some extra holes in the, what I'll call the leaf spring plates, and it's like ovalized the holes. I don't really love them. So even though I've got it back together on the ground and I've tested it, I didn't want to do all that work and then put something back in that was kind of subpar, we'll say. So I'll show you a picture. I ordered new leaf spring plates, new U-bolts and everything from Open Tracker Racing. Pretty much everything for this build has come through Open Tracker Racing. And that's just gonna make sure, give me the peace of mind to know that like everything's in there, nothing's gonna move around or anything like that. So I did test it. I will do another video on that, and I'll give you guys really like a full road test and put a camera maybe back underneath the rear end or something to let you see what it looks like. But I wanted to wrap this video up at this point because if I go any further and drive it like this, it's just not, it's not perfect. A couple little last things I'll say. When you tighten up the rear shackles, they tell you to come down to where you squish those bushings, right? Or the thrust washers, the Delrin washers, and just snug and then 1/8 of a turn. They said if you tighten them too much, you will bind them. The torque spec in the front, you need a 3/4 inch deep well socket, 65 foot-pounds on that one. So go ahead and do that. I couldn't find great torque specs for the U-bolts. I think I torqued them to like 40 or 50 foot-pounds, and honestly, it seemed a little high. So I'm gonna double check on that, and I might go to less. I buggered up one of the washers, which is another reason that I'm getting all new stuff. But this kit totally works. It's like under 250 bucks. They have them for all different types of vehicles, not just Comets, and it really does help. I also went out and kind of launched it from a dead stop, and I didn't have any wheel hop, which was awesome too. So big fan of this kit. Appreciate you guys watching. There will be more videos on this. Hopefully you found this useful and this is something you can use on your car or truck. Please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. I make tons of videos. There's tons of content on this Comet. Check it out. See you guys next time.